All right, thanks for coming, everybody. Let's get started with sound check. Jake, do you want to give us some drum lick? Sweet, sounds great. Ben, slap the bass a little bit. Awesome. Chloe, do some keys. Sweet, everybody hear all those? Joe, can you check your mic?
Hey, check, check.
Sorry. Everybody got that? Sweet. All right, let's take it from the top. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, Straight up to the gate, I don't wanna be late. Uberman, I got a plane to catch. Try to make an escape, and it gotta be great when they read my name, yeah. Time to show this little town what they've been missing. Should've never ever listened to the rhythm of the prison. They were never gonna have it my way. Get up, take a seat. Listen up, turn around to the beat. Chin up, take a seat. Ooh, it's not what you think. Get up, take a seat. Listen up, turn around to the beat. Chin up, take a seat. Ooh, it's not what you think. They be living in a limited world. 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 Take your time and learn a little about what you came from. Ooh, thought you were gonna change the world so fast. Ooh, now you're trying to make Ooh, it's like you never heard all of that. Scooby-Dooby-Doo. And you're kinda burned out if you go too fast. Took a Minneapolis, found a little bar somewhere in that northern loop. Picked up my guitar when I lay it down, gonna show my attitude. But it went a little different, they were playing different rhythms and they called it old school. Yeah, it went a little harder than I was used to. Get up, take a seat, listen up, turn around to the beat. Chin up, take a seat, ooh, it's not what you think. Get up, take a seat, listen up, turn around to the beat. Chin up, take a seat, ooh, it's not what you think. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. Take your time and learn a little about what you came from. You were gonna stop them all so fast. Ooh, now you're trying to make it last. Ooh, said you never would run out of gas. Scooby-Doo, but you're gonna burn out if you go too fast. They be living in a limited world, and they ain't seen nothing yet. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. What you give ain't what you get. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. They be living in a limited world, they be living in a limited world. Okay. So what in the world just happened, right? I mean, obviously, a band came out and played some pretty funky songs, right? But how? How did it happen? In terms of what you saw, it was a musical performance, right? But what about what you heard? How did these instruments produce sound and then it get to the speakers and then reach your ears in an exciting and energizing way? How did this music and this headset mic all come together to form this thing called sound, right? As we experience with our ears, one of our five senses, right? But more importantly, what decisions went into this process? What decisions were made before any of the music or any of the mics were turned on, before you even sat down today? The person in charge of these decisions is known as the audio engineer. I think the audio engineer plays a role that a lot of us are pretty unaware of in terms of how influential it is in live music. I think we've all experienced these decisions from he or she in both good and bad terms. So what I want you to do is go back in your mind and picture one of the best concerts or events or recitals that you've been to in your life in terms of sound. Maybe the electric guitar was just so punchy and shimmery, or the crisp, clear vocal was just punching through the mix, right? So keep that really good sound, that mix in your mind, and what made it good, right? Now, inversely, think of one of the worst experiences you've had with sound in terms of the sound quality, right? Maybe it was over the top loud, and it was just unbearable to sit in the room. Or maybe it was too quiet. Maybe you couldn't even hear what the lead singer was singing or the spokesperson was saying, right? So you have the good and the bad, right? So the question is, can you name the differences between the two? More importantly, can you name the decisions or pinpoint exactly what separates the good from the bad? This dichotomy is what the audio engineer brings to the table. They come with experience, they come with the decisions and the application to know good from bad. And this is all under their belt as an audio engineer. It's what they bring to the table. We can think of this individual maybe as an individual or an invisible force to be reckoned with, because the band and whoever's speaking falls at the mercy of this individual. So, I think before we get started into this mind of the audio engineer, I think it's important to define both terms that we've heard already, and you'll probably hear 100 more times tonight. So what is audio, right? Audio, at its core, at its foundation, is sound, right? We hear. Sound is basically audio. It's just a fancy word for it, right? Especially when recorded, transmitted, or reproduced. And reproduced is what we're going to focus on with live music tonight. That's pretty much audio, right? Sound. Pretty simple. So who is the engineer when we say audio engineer? The engineer is responsible for the technical side of a live performance or recording. But I underlined technical side, as you can see there. I'm going to argue against just having technical in there. I think we're going to see later that it's also an artistic role that they play. There's definitely the technical side that the engineer has, but we're going to see how creative and artistic it can get later. So, audio engineer, right? The person responsible for the technical and creative sound when it comes to live music for our purposes. So, we're going to jump right into understanding how sound works, because that's in the mind of an audio engineer. They know how sound gets from the stage to the speakers. So we're going to go over, simplify it down to 4 points in terms of how sound travels from the stage to your ears. Really quickly, right? because you can hear this headset mic almost at the exact same time that I'm speaking. So first signal, or sound, is generated, that's point one, processed, and then manipulated, and then amplified. And all this is happening simultaneously, but they are very different stages. These 4 stages are separate and unique to their own stage. So we're going to jump right into the first point of signal generation and how sound is produced on point A, and then A, and then all the way to B, we're going to jump to amplification. So we're going to kind of jump across the whole boat here. And then we're going to come back to the middle two. And I'll explain why those arrows are there later. You'll see this is kind of that technical versus creative side that we're going to dive into. So let's get right into signal generation. What in the world does that mean? Signal generation basically is, right, it's anything that produces sound. It can be a guitar that you just heard, right? It produces acoustic waves in the air. Really, anything that produces waves, like clapping or stomping, anything you can hear, the engineer classifies as a source of signal generation, right? It can be anything from instruments like drums or piano or somebody speaking on a headset or a choir, right? Anything you can hear and put on a stage, they're going to classify that as a source. And this is in terms of numbers, right? They ask, how many sources are we dealing with from the get-go, right? Before they even go to an event, usually they're asking, how many sources am I dealing with, though, so I can know what equipment to bring and stuff like that, right? So that's basically signal generation at its core, but here's a problem. The problem is, right, we have acoustic guitar. We can hear the acoustic guitar if we play it out right in front, right? If I play this in a living room, or you play your piano in your living room, and you can hear the sound, right? You can hear the instrument because you're sitting right next to it, right? Pretty simple. But what if, that's an icon of an ear, by the way. What if your listening ear is extremely far away, like at least maybe you're 100 feet or even 1,000 feet from what's on stage, right? There's no way you're going to hear the fullness of that acoustic guitar like you would sitting in your living room, right? So this problem is solved by the audio engineer's best friend, and that is speakers, amplification, right? We all know and love speakers, right? Movie theaters, big time, especially with modern day technology. Desktop speakers, headphones, listening to your favorite vinyl records, right? All these use speakers. Screaming Queen in the car with your friends. Live sound speakers, right? We all know and love speakers and know what they do. They produce sound. But how do they produce sound, right? How does a speaker driver push air and our ears interpret that air being pushed? It's a crazy phenomenon, right? It's wild to think about. So there's 2 different characteristics that I think that the audio engineer has to understand when it comes to speakers, and that's amplitude and frequency. And don't worry, we won't dive too deep here. You'll be okay. Amplitude. So amplitude basically is the strength of a signal, right, without regards to its content. Amplitude basically is volume, if you want to think of it like that. We all know how to crank the stereo in the car, right? You're just basically adding amplification to the speakers. That's amplitude on a basic level. It's measured in sound pressure level, SPL. It's kind of the universal measurement when it comes to speakers. And it asks, how loud is it? And this is a numerical measurement, universal across the board, that everybody measures. Audio engineers use it. OSHA uses it for reasons. And it's measured in decibels. Decibels are decibels measure SPL. It's kind of like distance is with feet, right? Feet is the unit, and distance is the measurement. Or maybe miles, or maybe seconds is to time, right? And decibels is the measurement of SPL. So that's amplitude. Frequency So remember amplitude, that'll come back later. Frequency is the other characteristic that speakers deal with. Frequency is the amount of completed cycles in a second, right? It's basically vibrations per second is what frequency is. It's as simple as that. So it's measured in hertz, right? Frequency is how many times a wave, if you've seen, like in physics, this is dealing with physics, and I'm not a physician by any means. But this is a measurement of frequency is hertz. And basically, the lower the hertz, the lower vibrations per second, the lower the pitch is, right? So if I talk way low, I can't talk that low, but if I'm talking lower, my vocal cords vibrate at a lower speed. Or if I talk higher and I pitch my voice up, my vocal cords are vibrating at a faster rate, right? And we perceive this in pitch, right? A lower pitch versus a higher pitch. Lower frequency, higher frequency. And we can hear, so this, right, we can hear between like the low and the high, and there's a range of frequencies that humans can hear. And audio engineers like to call it 20 to 20. We can hear down all the way to 20 hertz, all the way up to 20,000 hertz. That's 20 vibrations a second, up to 20,000 times. This is fun to think of it in terms of a piano. If you think of the lowest note, this is your left. If you think of the lowest note on a piano, it vibrates at a fundamental frequency of 27.5 hertz. That low string is vibrating 27.5 times a second. And it's producing higher frequencies with the overtone series and such. But the lowest note is 27.5. And the highest note on a piano is 4,000 hertz, right? That's kind of crazy to think about. The highest string vibrates 4,000 times a second. It's kind of crazy. And everything, all the notes in between, match and fill the frequencies in between that. So that's kind of a fun way to think of frequency in terms of a piano. I like to do it. So we're going to listen. This is going to be a sweep from 20 all the way up to 20,000. Here it is. It's going to be super low. Bassy. We just passed 100. That's 200 hertz. There's 500, all the way up to 1,000. Starting to get high-pitched. Coming up to 5,000. Yikes. Yeah, it's quite piercing, right, when it gets up there. That was the whole range of your human hearing. Any sound that you can hear fits on that spectrum, which is crazy, right? Cars, planes, people talking, any sound fit on that sweep just now. But it's frequencies and different amplitudes that make up different sounds, right? And those frequencies in relation to each other. So speakers attempt to reproduce this range. And if we put frequency and amplitude on a plot, it's called a frequency plot. Hooray. It's a visual representation of frequencies. And normally you have an RTA showing those frequencies on a board. So we just heard the whole sweep of frequencies, right? From really low frequencies to really high, piercing frequencies. And we can categorize these different sections based on relativity, right? So this range is considered low because it sounds low to us, right? Low in pitch. And usually it's from the lowest of lows, like 20, up to around maybe 100 or 200 hertz. And these categorizations are used by the audio engineer. And sometimes they fluctuate depending on who's behind the console or what you're dealing with. This is the mid-range from about 200 to 1,000. 1K to about 5K we can call the high mids. It's arguable, again, these ranges. But, and then the highs, super high, about 5K and on, as we heard. Super piercing frequencies, right? So we're going to listen to each of these ranges and see what they sound like. So this is the entire orange section, all the frequencies from 20 to 200 played at once. Here it is. It's quite bassy. Right? Super low stuff. And you can see the RTA going there, showing all the frequencies combined together in what we call white noise. here is the mid-range frequencies played all at once. Kind of sounds like wind, right? Those super low frequencies, or mid frequencies. And a lot of fundamental frequencies, like my voice or guitars, their body likes to sit in this low mid range. Here's the high mids played all at once. Kind of sounds like rain on a roof, right? It's a little more sibilant. This is where this range is a lot of definition and clarity when it comes to mixing. And the highest of highs, here it is. Sounds like crickets or whatever you want to say. Super high-end frequencies, right? And this whole range of human hearing is what the audio engineer takes in, right? These categorizations of low frequencies compared to highs. And this is what speakers try to reproduce, these entire ranges of a frequency plot. But it's really, really hard, and the audio engineer knows this, it's really hard for one speaker to reproduce all of the 20 to 20, right? So science allows us to engineer drivers that are specific to certain frequencies. And most of the time, there's just two-way speakers that have two drivers in them. And one of them is called the woofer, and one of them is called the tweeter. And the tweeter normally produces the high frequencies from about 2,000 hertz on is what this one reproduces. And the woofer is responsible for low frequencies, about 2,000 hertz down to 20. But this one actually can't get down all the way to 20 hertz, right? It's really hard for, I think it's a 5-inch driver, for that small of a driver to reproduce that low of a frequency, which is why these guys exist down here. These guys are called subwoofers, right? Beneath the woofer is my favorite kind of driver. They are the things that hit you in the chest when that kick drum is played, or the bass guitar. And they are super big drivers that excel in producing those frequencies sub below what the woofer can produce. Usually their range looks about like this. It's all the way down to 20, maybe up to 60 or 80, or maybe even 100, depending on the cabinet. But those super low-end frequencies is what the subwoofer is responsible for. So there's a relationship between the tweeter and the woofer and the subwoofer in live sound. This is a flown line array that you're looking at. And those tops produce the high frequencies, right, up to about maybe 80 hertz, and that sub on top produces 80 and below. So there's a relationship between the two that the engineer has to know really well when it comes to tuning a live rig to a room, right? They need to know the relationship between the tops and the subs and what sounds good. Maybe the subs are too overpowering and need to bring it back, or maybe they need to boost the subs or lower the tops, right? This balance between the two is really important when it comes to live sound. So, not the laser. There it is. That's generation and amplification, the beginning and the end, right? We good? You with me? Sweet, yeah. We'll be okay. Here's processing. This is when we get into sound technology. So this is after the instruments on stage produce sound, but before it gets to the speakers. So what all goes into processing? There are two main elements that we're going to talk about that go into processing or fall under processing, and they're sound technology devices. One of them is the stage box, and another is the mixing console. And those two elements fundamentally produce sound that is sent to speakers after it's generated. So the stage box, here's a picture of it. It's literally a box, right? It's a box that lives on stage. Actually, this is the exact unit that lives back here in this closet that takes in all the inputs from the stage. And its job is to combine these multiple signals and send them to the mixing console, right? This box converts analog signal into digital data. And that's right, it's like data like network kind of data, like ones and zeros. kind of thing. And it's doing this simultaneously for a lot of inputs. It's kind of fascinating. It's turning like my voice or a guitar into data. And all of this is combined into one single cable. It's not taking all 24 inputs on stage and sending 24 lines of data. It's combining all 24 signals in one box and sending one line of data all over a single cable. It's crazy. And this is a two-way communication, right? So the stage box can accept inputs and also put out outputs over this data cable. And this stage box is plugged right into the console. So here's a diagram of this exact stage. Right, we got a mic, electric, bass, keys, drums. And that stage box lives back there, and all these cables that you see, or maybe wireless, plug into that stage box with cable, right? And then in the cable, or in the box, it's transformed to data over one cable, and that one cable is sent to the console. So that's the second part. So that's the stage box, right? It takes in signal, converts it into data, and then sends it on to the console. So the console is the second part. This is a picture of the exact console back there. It's a Yamaha PM7, super fancy. It looks like a spaceship, right? Lots of knobs and buttons, and it does a lot. But its main purpose is to change the level, the tone, and the dynamics individually of each channel, of each input on stage, right? It's also in charge of combining these signals together, and it also routes these signals to destinations. So like a destination being these speakers above you, or these subs, or maybe the lobby, or these floor wedges, right? So changing the level, tone, dynamics, it combines them and it routes them to places. It's also in charge of doing effects. It can apply onboard or offboard effects to channels, or to speakers, or to the subs. That's basically a mixing console. It's where all the magic happens, and it's the audio engineer's favorite tool that they get to know and love, and it's where they produce the magic, right? So those two elements, the stage box and the console, really drive the signal, right? The audio that gets to the speakers. So that's processing. The super technical, rigid side that there's not a lot of manipulation done. Manipulation. This is the creative side, right? The processing is the hard, the ones and zeros data conversion to the console. Manipulation is the third point in the chain. And this is where we come full circle. I would want to argue that this role that the audio engineer plays, this manipulation stage, is where the creativity happens. It's where they get to make decisions and artistic choices that shape and change the tone or the level of inputs on stage, in maybe ways that are problem-solving or shape it to create depth or interest, right? So I think originally I had a lot of slides talking about the technicalities of all these tools that the audio engineer has, and it was overwhelming. But I think a better way to understand it is with an analogy. So imagine the audio engineer as a painter. Imagine he's a painter, or he or she is a painter with a canvas, and that canvas being the sound that they're producing. And a painter has a tool palette, right, with multiple colors on it, lots of colors and brushes and technique, right? And so these five main tools that we're going to talk about are the colors that the audio engineer mixes and paints and uses to create a beautiful art in the form of sound. So the first tool that they get to use is called Equalization, or EQ. And this tool is basically a tool that shapes how an input sounds, right? EQ is taking those frequency plots and making either small or large changes to the whole plot. Usually it's around 4 different frequency bands that can make these changes. So in terms of the artistic analogy of painting, you can imagine EQ is maybe a single color. Imagine the color red that the audio engineer is painting with. Imagine red, and EQ, what it does is it can change maybe the hue or the saturation of that red color. EQ applies different tones and sculpts and makes different frequencies rise or cut and changes this color around, right? Maybe from a darker, less saturated red to a brighter and more interesting maroon, maybe. So that's the first tool, if we think of it in that way. Compression is another tool. It's another color on the audio engineer's palette that reduces the dynamic range of a signal. It's like my voice, for example, can get really quiet if I whisper, or I can yell and have a lot of dynamic range. And what a compressor does is it takes that signal and compresses it from the lows, maybe pushing up in volume, or bringing the two high yelling frequencies down. And so in light of the analogy, maybe compression is a spectrum of a color, right? Think of like the spectrum of blue. Maybe it's a spectrum that goes from dark blue to a lighter blue. And what compression does is it reduces the range of the dark to the light, maybe to a more lower mid to a higher mid range of blue. So it's less dynamic, if that makes sense. Those are the 2 main tools of manipulation that they use. EQ, changing the tone, and compression, reducing dynamics. Another tool on the palette is reverb. Reverb, basically in its technical form, is it adds room emulation. It takes a signal like my voice and puts it in a room. Can you hear that? That's reverb. So it's adding a voice into a room. And you can change the room inside a reverb rack unit, or maybe the length of the reverb, or how it sounds. So this is a really cool tool. If we think of it in painting terms, it's maybe, imagine like a 2D canvas, right? It's flat, there's not a lot of depth. Reverb takes that canvas and adds dimension to it. It adds a 3rd dimension that makes it a lot more interesting, and it puts depth into the process, right? And we hear this in the form of sound, right? So that's the 3rd one. Delay is another tool. It's the 4th out of the 5. That's delay. It's like an echo. Yeah. It's a repetition, right? A lot of people confuse it with echo, but delay is actually another reproduced. It reproduces itself after a certain period of time. So in painting analogy that we're going with here, you can think of it maybe as like a repetition of a color. Maybe it's purple painted on a canvas, and that color is repeated visually multiple times. So that kind of adds a length and another dimension. It's like reverb, but it's more articulate in that it's the exact same signal repeated. So another tool, the 4th or 5th and final tool, is mixing. This is kind of the foundation of what the audio engineer does. They make all these decisions with EQ and compression and reverb and delay, but at the end goal that everybody notices, I think, first and foremost, is the mixing. The instruments or the voice in relation to how loud it is. This is done with all the faders and how loud those faders are pushed in relation to other faders. And they eventually, after all this decision making, they paint a masterpiece, right? But not of a visual proportion, of one that we can only hear, that invisible force kind of analogy. So we're actually going to hear this decision-making live right now. So as the band comes back on stage, we're going to display Bear, who's our audio technician. We're going to display the screen that he's looking at live right now. So this is the screen that's on the board that he's looking at. And you can see all the different channels that are labeled up there. And drums is what you can see right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to display a before and after of these decisions that Bear has made with EQ and compression and reverb and delay and all that, and the mixing level, right? All 5 of these tools in light of painting, right? So we're going to hear the raw signal first, the signal straight from the kick drum that goes right into the microphone with no changes added to it yet. So this is raw signal. Jake, go ahead and give us 4 kicks. That's raw signal, untainted, uneq'd. Now here is the after the B, right? In comparison from A to B, this is after EQ decisions and after Bear sends it to the subwoofers and adding compression, right? And maybe not so much reverb since it's a kick, but this is kicks after Bear's manipulation to the signal. Go ahead and give us 4 more. That's a kick drum, right? A lot beefier, right? Adding it to the subs. And we can clearly see that there's decisions being made, right? Both practically and artistically to the kick drum signal. Let's try snare. So Jake, give us 4 hits on the snare. This is raw signal, unmanipulated by Bear. Go ahead and give us. Yeah. It sounds very interesting. That's the raw signal going into that Shure mic on the snare. But here is after Bear has moved the signal, the frequencies around with EQ and compressed it maybe a bit and added some reverb. So here is the manipulated signal that Bear has transformed that snare into sound. Go ahead and give us 4. Yeah, super clean, right? A lot different from what you heard. And both kick and snare take a lot of patience and perseverance when it comes to those two. There's a lot of decisions being made on both of those. So Ben's going to play some bass for us, and we're going to hear decisions on bass that Bear has made. This is the raw signal. Go ahead and play, Ben. Yeah, so that's bass. In terms of how much changes happen to bass is relative. Ben has a pedal board down here, so he already has a lot of effects being put onto his bass. So practically speaking, when it gets to Bear at the console, it's already had a lot of decisions made into it. So what Bear is doing is maybe fine-tuning. He's adding maybe less decisions, maybe less compression or less EQ at that matter. So here's after Bear's decisions. It might not be as obvious, but see if you can pick out the difference. There was at the end, added the subs. Yeah, not too much difference, right? Because Ben already has his tone sculpted in his pedal board. But there's definitely decisions being made. It might not be as obvious as the kick or snare, but they are there, right? So Chloe, would give us some keys. This is the raw signal of keys, unmanipulated by Bear. Yeah, and again, it's a digital keyboard, so there's not going to be a whole lot of change. But let's see if we can pick out the differences in maybe EQ or compression. This is after Bear's manipulation. Yeah, I hear that tail of reverb on there. Gives it some depth and dimension. And maybe there's a little bit of EQ. But it is less obvious, right? these two digital instruments, compared to kick and snare in that terms. So we're going to go to Joanna on the vocal mic, and we're gonna explore this a little more in depth than the other three individuals. So we're going to start with the raw signal, and here he's going to show us the unmanipulated EQ, right? And you can see kind of the RTA in action. So this is raw signal. Go ahead and sing for us.
If you don't plant some seeds, then they won't grow. If you don't make mistakes, how will you ever know?
So all those bands that you can see are frequency bands that Joe's voice is putting into the microphone, and that microphone picks up digitally. So that's the raw signal. Now, what Bear's going to do is kind of humorous. He's going to make terrible artistic decisions in the form of EQ. And yeah, that's pretty bad. So let's hear what this sounds like, and maybe this is a poor decision.
If you don't plant some seeds, then they won't grow. If you don't make mistakes, how will you ever know?
Yuck, right? There's no clarity or any form of that. So it's this idea that EQ is a tool and compression that Bear has a lot of power with, right? He completely changed the tone of her voice with this one tool in terms of how nasty and muddy it was and how unclear, right? So here's the proper decision, maybe a better solution in terms of EQ on Joe's mic. So here's after the manipulation.
If you don't plant some seeds, then they won't grow. If you don't make mistakes, how will you ever know?
Yeah, so there's some reverb in there, much more clear with the EQ, and you can definitely see there's less being done. And it's already a really great capsule, so there's not a lot that Bear has to do to make it sound great, right? But these ideas that each of these tools offer a way of changing and sculpting how the inputs on stage sound, right? And they all come together. All these decisions come together with mixing too, right? Pushing levels and volumes of individual instruments after all these decisions have been made on the color palette, right? And he paints the picture. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna build the music of our next song. And I invite you to closely listen to see if you can pick out some of the reverb or delay, or maybe those decisions of EQ on each of the instruments. So Jake, why don't you go ahead and start the click for our next song. And Jake's gonna lay down the rhythm, and we're gonna build the song from there. Yeah. Ben, why don't you add some bass for us? Yeah. Chloe, give us some keys. Next song, it's going to be a sum of all of these decisions, right? This is after all the decisions have been made and all the mixing together. So, this is
are planted firm upon the ground. Fortunate that you heard your calling, but you go forward, then you're turning back around. You say you're scared to fly, but you've been chasing open skies. Might lose your way from time to time. You can stay here and justify all the days waiting in your life, and you can be your 'cause you're ready for takeoff. You don't have to go it alone. You might find that the feeling of flying is one that you already know. You already know. Staring up at the ceiling won't get you higher than 3 feet above your bed. Seems your dreams got you reeling. Aren't they supposed to get you moving instead? You say you're scared to fly, but you've been chasing open skies. Might lose your way from time to time. You can stay here and justify all the days waiting in your life, and you can be your own image of pilot. Look to the sky, 'cause you're ready for takeoff. You don't have to go it alone. You might find that the feeling of flying is one that you already know. You already know. If you don't plant some seeds, then they won't grow. If you don't make mistakes, how will you ever know? They say stop when you're young, but you'll never be too old to stop what you came for. You can never be too bold. So go plant your seeds. I promise they'll grow. Make some mistakes and then you will know how to stop what you came for. You can never be too bold. You can never be too bold.
Yeah. So I have some thank yous here. And I wrote them down so I wouldn't botch them. So thank you for coming to the senior presentation, my senior presentation. I hope it's been an interesting and fun experience to see what goes on behind the mixer, right? Who the audio engineer really is, and this role that he plays, this influential decision-making role. So some thank yous I would like to address some certain special people. First of all, thank you to you for showing up, for taking time in your night to come out to whatever this was, right? Thank you to my incredible band here. Can we get some applause for them? Yeah, they're so good. So I'm going to introduce some people. This is Joanna Stafford on vocals. This is Chloe Bishop on keys. We got Ben Bishop slapping the bass over there. Yeah. And we have the man, the myth, the legend, Jake Thomas on drums. Yeah. So thank you guys for all the work that you've put into these Cory Wong songs. Thank you very much. Thank you to all my family and friends that have supported me in so many ways throughout my college career. A very special thank you to my parents, Steve and Annie, from the earliest years of piano
to the sounds of blaring electric guitars late at night. But seriously, you guys, thank you for the love and the support through all these years, and all the sacrifices that you guys have made. Thank you. Thank you to all the professors of the music and theater department for giving their time and energy into pouring into students like me who have a passion and a love for music. A huge thank you to Mr. David Farley, who's watching on the live stream. Thank you very much for all the guitar knowledge and the hours that you have poured into my life teaching me guitar. It's been a journey these past 4 years, so thank you very much for that. Very, very special thank you and congratulations to Dr. Jen Edwards. Give her, yeah. So. Let's see where she's at. Jen, you have encouraged and guided and taught me so much. I can't pick her out. Where is she? Yes, there she is. Sorry. You have guided and mentored me in so many ways throughout all my years, and words can't describe how thankful I am for you and all that you do for me and for everyone here at JBU. Thank you very much. Last and certainly not least, I want to thank Bear, Klenda, and AVL for putting on, give him a round. Thank you to Bear and all the AVL staff that have put up with me. I'm just kidding. Thank you for all the incredible dedication to all the presentations and the performances that you guys have put on. This one was a lot to ask for, but every one of them has been extremely dedicated and put in a lot of work for this. So thank you guys very much. That's the end of my thank yous. So there will be a reception in the lobby after this, so please enjoy that. But before we go, we have one more Cory Wong song to play for you guys. So we're gonna hit that. Let me put up my guitar. All right, hit it, Jake.
Looking all around at the people I see, everybody's living the dream. Starring in the show that we film on our phones, taking photos for pretend magazines. I don't want silver, don't want the bronze. I won't play party, I play the fonts. Every time I see a shiny thing on a screen, maybe that could be me. Everybody's running after something golden, golden. We don't stop running till we get to something golden, golden. Looking over there at the grass at your place, wondering why it's greener than mine. While you're looking over here at my studio space, wishing that you had that kind of time. I don't want silver, don't want the bronze. I won't play party, I play the fonts. Every time I see a shiny thing on a screen, hey, what's that over there? Everybody's running after something golden, golden. We don't stop running till we get to something golden, golden.
down on its hands and knees. But why does the shark